get the same results. That's what we're talking about. And remember we talked about last time how these cancer researchers were redoing their own work and weren't able to get the same results again. I mean, that's literally criminal, because that's the cornerstone of science. And in recent years, we're getting more and more studies that are being called not reproducible. And is it fraud? Well, probably some cases, but for the most part, it's just sloppiness and it's unintentional. And just poor study design, poor failing to use appropriate statistics. Experiments details may be described inadequately to publish it. We talked about that with both Nature and Science are taking steps as a journal to allow more room in those journals for a complete laying out of the methods. And here's an example that this paper cited. A drug called minocycline showed promise in mouse models of the neurodegenerative disease ALS. The findings led to a phase 3 clinical trial that was funded by NIH. Enrolled 400 patients between 23 and 27. But the disease actually progressed faster in those patients who received the drug than in those who had received a placebo. And when science rescreened this minocycline and many other compounds from 221 studies in the mouse models, they found that they had no significant effects. So in other words, these studies were completed. Try this out. It made it all the way to phase 3 clinical trials, and it was based on a fraud or a non-effective result. So the solutions is that, well, I don't know if this is a solution, a 1-hour training session. I don't know if this was in the paper. Really? Wow, we got to do that? Oh, no. But more importantly, it's about transparency in the biomedical sciences. And Nature is one, and from Nature, and I'm not even going to read this again. It's just saying that now you can publish your entire methods to make it reproducible, but also transparent as to how you did something, and they expect those sorts of things. Other solutions, these look like maybe a little bit more effective. Rigorous peer review, journal editors work on this transparency, and that the journals just can do more to look at conflicts of interest and other things that may be allowing people to cut corners as far as documenting how they do their science. And some other things that are possible solutions. There's the Center for Open Science. This is centerforopen-science.org. And it's dedicated to looking at alignment between scientific values and practices. It's a nonprofit tech startup, and they move to evaluate studies and see if and evaluate them for reproducibility. And so there are some private orgs out there that do that. They work with scientists, and well, I'm not going to go through this any more than that, except that there's a number of efforts out there to foster open science, and that's kind of the buzzword, is open science. Being able to get your data out there, get your results out there, get everything out there that can be reviewed and transparently. This isn't an assignment. This is something I did for something else for some reason. What I wanted to also do, but we're not going to do it just because of shortness of time, is Nature put out a special, it's a compendium, I guess, over the last 3 years of papers that they've published on the problems with reproducibility and transparency, and having everything to do with p equals 0.05. I mean, what's the magic of having a p-value of 0.05? And other statistical sort of standards, and again, journals publishing complete results or complete methods. And so there's, like I said, a whole series of articles. Okay, so, I still don't know why I put this here, but I'm enamored by this eye of God thing. All right. So here, this is from the Daily Mail. It says, "The eye of God stares down at us from the depths of space, watching our tiny world from 700 light years away. The blue pupil, the white of the eye, the pink lid are created by layers of gas and dust thrown off, but illuminated by a star as it comes to the end of its life over the course of thousands of years." Thousands of years.
How poetic.
Right. But so this is what. And I think I put this together. It was for a physics class or something at one point. But I mean, this is a whole bunch of photographs that are stitched together. I mean, you guys probably know more about this than I do. You know, between NASA's Hubble, it's one of the Hubble Space Telescope's big accomplishments. There's a number of just awesome photos that the Hubble Space Telescope has taken. But it's also got some other images that are again stitched together from other observatories to make this nebula and make it look, I don't know, awe-inspiring. It's a poster or something like that, but it's not really the truth the way that's described. It's what someone's interpreted this celestial event. And this little part is just I skipped a whole bunch of the how do we know what we know. That's you don't want to know about that. But science offers a method to know and obtain knowledge, I guess. But these ways. Other ways, such as lived experience or just thinking like Descartes or something like that, you're not necessarily getting new knowledge that way. But the way to produce scientific knowledge is the scientific method. And so it says just a way to describe the process behind finding things out in the physical world, as opposed to guessing or making generalizations. So there's steps involved, and from defining a question, and you know all this, gathering information and resources, forming hypotheses, collecting data, analyzing the data, reinterpreting it, publish results, and then retest. And that's the part we're talking about with reproducibility, is being able to go through the process again and get the same answer. So we do science to get knowledge in theory, and this is just a great quote from, this is all about integrity. For a scientist, this is almost like the eye of God thing. Integrity embodies, above all, the individual's commitment to intellectual honesty and personal responsibility. For an institution, integrity is a commitment to creating an environment that promotes responsible conduct by embracing the standards of excellence, trustworthiness, and lawfulness. But in reality, this is kind of what we end up having to deal with, is the science news cycle. So here you are, right there. There you are. You're right there. You're working away on your laptop. And your research. Conclusion. A is correlated to B with a p-value of 0.56, given C assuming D and under E conditions. And then it's translated by UNM's PR office to say, for immediate release, scientists find potential link between A and B under certain conditions. And then, which is then picked up by news wire organizations. A causes B, say scientists. And then it gets to the internets. And it says, scientists out to kill us again. And then it's posted by a random dude. And then it says, OMG, I knew it. And then it comes back over here. CNC, cable news. It says, we saw it on a blog. A causes B all of the time. What will this mean for Obama? And then it's picked up on channel 4 or 7 or whatever, and it says what you don't know about A can kill you. More at 11. They never tell you then, right? They just say you got to go watch at 11. And then here it is, A killer among us. And then eventually it makes it to your grandma. She's got a little tinfoil hat on, and it says, I'm wearing this so we don't get A. Whatever it is. And that's exactly what happens to our stuff. It's exactly, I just love this cartoon. Sure, you can do all this good stuff, or whatever, and this is what happens. So, what do you do? What should you do? Oh, I wonder if I can play this. Oh, this will be exciting. This is, will it work? I'm just going to try it, Joe. We'll see what happens. Okay, ready? Do we have sound?
It's a very long history, of course. I was very delighted to have Messelson as a colleague, and I learned from him a tremendous lot about biological weapons. Of course, he knew everything. And we were both cleared for the secret information, so we knew everything that had been done. The United States had a pretty massive program at that time, and we had all kinds of weapons in stockpile, various lethal bugs and various kinds of delivery systems. And it was obvious to both of us that this made absolutely no sense, that there was no conceivable military use for these things that would, from our point of view, make any sense at all. Again, quite apart from the ethics. And that one should be able to make a strong case to get them abolished. And that Messelson actually did. And it happened about, I don't know when it was, 6 years later when Nixon was president. That by good luck, that Messelson lived next door to Henry Kissinger, and he got to know Henry Kissinger, and he persuaded Henry Kissinger that this biological weapon program was terribly dangerous, and if it got in the hands of terrorists, could be extremely lethal, and was actually useless from our own point of view. And so he persuaded Kissinger, and Kissinger persuaded Nixon, and Nixon unilaterally decided then to abolish the whole program, which was one of the major steps forward, I think, towards sanity. So I give Nixon enormous credit for that. So the United States program was completely abolished. Stockpiles were destroyed, and the weapons lab at Fort Detrick was converted to peaceful uses, which it still is. So that was a huge step forward. And about a year later, we then negotiated with the Russians the Biological Weapons Convention, which made the thing bilateral. And as we now know, the Russians cheated. And of course, that's very sad. I mean, that the Russians signed the convention but continued their program after we stopped. But it's still true that the convention was nevertheless very valuable. And I think it's a fine example of the fact that an unverifiable treaty is still useful. This was unverifiable. There was no way we could tell that the Russians were cheating until after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But it's still good to have a treaty because it gives you a stick to beat them with, and it's, from a legal point of view, it's an enormous help to have an agreement which they signed, so that whenever we get evidence that they've been cheating, as we often do, we can take them up and protest publicly and appeal to the United Nations and generally embarrass them. So it is, I think it's a very useful thing to have the treaty. Without the treaty, we would have no way of even complaining. So although treaties are imperfect instruments, but they still are very helpful. So I'm 100% behind the treaty, no matter how much the Russians cheat.
Sorry, Russians. But so here's an example of at least a program of research that was stopped because it was determined to not be, well, useful, I guess, but also somewhat immoral, at least in this person's view. Let's see if I can get back. Oh, I'm here. Okay. Another example that also has to do with Nixon. This is in your little book. I think I sent it around as a PDF. Sorry, it's on Dropbox, so we'll get it over to the other one. On being a scientist. About Agent Orange, and I'll just read this. Ending the use of Agent Orange. In the early 40s, a graduate student in botany at University of Illinois named Arthur Galston found the application of a synthetic chemical that would hasten the flowering of plants, enabled crops to be grown in colder climates. But if the chemical was applied at higher concentrations, it was toxic, causing the leaves of the plants to fall off. Galston reported the results in '43 in his thesis, filed it in the library at Caltech, and then went off to serve in the Navy. Following the war, Galston learned the military had read his thesis. See, somebody does read your thesis. and had used it, along with other research, to devise powerful herbicides that could be used in wartime. Beginning in 1962, the military sprayed more than 50,000 tons of herbicides on forests and fields in Vietnam. By far the most widely used mixture of defoliants was known as Agent Orange, from the orange stripe around the 55-gallon drums used to store the chemicals. Galston later wrote that the use of this research in the development of Agent Orange provided the scientific and emotional link that compelled his involvement in opposition to massive spraying of these compounds during the war. At a 1966 meeting of the American Society of Plant Physiologists, so that's just, was it 63? Anyway, 62. He circulated a resolution citing the possible toxic effects of defoliants on humans and animals and the long-term consequences for food production and the environment, which he sent to Lyndon Johnson. During the next several years, as evidence for the toxic effects of Agent Orange accumulated, Galston and a growing number of other scientists continued to oppose the use of defoliants in Vietnam. In '69, he and several other scientists met with Richard Nixon's science advisor, whom Galston had known at Caltech, and presented him with the information on the harmful effects of Agent Orange. Science advisor recommended to the president that the spraying be discontinued, and the use of defoliants was phased out by 1970, 5 years before the war ended. Galton later wrote, "I used to think that one could avoid involvement in antisocial consequences of science simply by not working on any project that might be turned to evil or destructive ends. I have learned that things are not that simple. The only recourse is for a scientist to remain involved in it to the end." So again, a second example of a scientist that was involved in research that was used to some ends that at least this fellow didn't feel was fit. So what's your responsibility? What sort of social responsibility do you have? You can be passive, in other words, there's do no harm, non-maleficence, or active, in other words, promoting the good and beneficence. These are sort of some basic ethical principles. And some basic values that we talked about having to do with human subjects research was autonomy and justice, but also truthfulness, being honest and objective and as well as subjective. So this is what social responsibility really is having the ability to, in your work and your actions, to do no harm to either society or to other people, or promote the good. So what sometimes happens in science is that people work on things or have scientific theories that maybe are socially unpopular. And one, of course, is evolution versus intelligence design. This is from the Union of Concerned Scientists. And the Union of Concerned Scientists has been big about science as a way of knowing. And the very simple things that I pointed out when talking about getting scientific knowledge. And that is, the whole process of hypothesis testing. And this is all they're pointing out, is that whatever your theory is, it must be tested by experiments and observed in the natural world. It must be falsifiable. That's back to Karl Popper and others. So experiments must exist that could prove something to be false. That's what meant by falsifiability. It cannot be proven. In other words, you can't prove that something's true. It can only be confirmed or disconfirmed. And it's the subject of revision and change. So you come up with a great conclusion. Evolution could be, what's the word they use here? Revised or changed or shown to not be true. You just need one case, right? You just need one case of showing that evolution doesn't work, and it has to be revised or changed. And I mean, it just hasn't happened. And so the problem is you have folks that don't agree with it socially, and you come up with these things like intelligent design, like it's going to compete with evolution. Well, it's not going to compete with evolution because it doesn't fit the scientific paradigm of experimentation and falsifiability and all that kind of stuff. You have a system of belief, that's a way of knowing, or you have a system of science, and that's the way of knowing. And I think when we're talking about being researchers, we're talking about the second. Climate change is the deal. I'm just going to gloss over stuff. But this was during the 2012, I think. Yeah, 2012 Senate, mostly Senate election, wasn't presidential. And there's Landry was running for her seat in Louisiana, and there's a couple of other folks that were running against her. One of them actually won; she didn't. But they're talking about climate change, and it's just we're not seeing. One the candidate said, "Well, the evidence is shaky. The scientists just don't agree on it, and there's really no reason to do anything." That is not projecting well, so I'm not going to read any of the stuff. Scientists come up with this is from NASA, a global climate change research thing, and it's talking about over 650,000 years, atmospheric carbon dioxide had never been above this line. Well, in 1950, it started to spike, and that was one of the signals that scientists use that, oh, something's going on. I wonder what it is. And then there's been a whole slew of study in all sorts of avenues about climate change. Well, here's our friends that are running for president now. And I mean, so the point of this, I have no political side on this at all. I'm just saying that go and look and see what these folks are saying. All right. So Obama's on the top, and then I don't even know where to start. Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Christie, Cruz, Fiorina, Huckabee, Jindal, Rubio, Santorum, Perry, Paul, Walker, and don't worry, we have another one here in a minute. And all of those folks are pretty much saying, well, I guess the climate's changing, but the science really isn't clear on what percentage is human-made and what percentage is just natural pattern. What can we do about it? Ben Carson says the temperature is either going up or down at any point, so it's really not a big deal. Okay. Christie is a little bit more pragmatic. I think it's real. I don't think that's deniable. But how much does human activity contributed? Okay, I'm not going to go through all these, but Huckabee, whether it's man-made, yeah, this one's pretty funny. You can read these in more detail. I'll put them; they'll be up there. But these are all direct quotes. Anybody want me to read in particular?
I think Perry's was pretty good.
Perry? I don't know. In his book, he wrote, "Global warming is a contrived, phony mess. Accused scientists of manipulating data to win research funding. Quote, I don't believe that we have the settled science by any sense of the imagination. The Environmental Protection Agency is also the department he famously forgot that he would cut in the 2011 presidential debate." I don't know if you remember that part. Anyway, it goes on. I mean, most of them say, I don't believe it. The scientists don't agree. So, it's probably just a natural thing if it's even occurring at all. I'm just focused on the front runners. Yeah. And these are tweets he's put out. The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. Ice storms roll from Texas to Tennessee, and I'm in Los Angeles, and it's freezing. Global warming is a total and very expensive hoax. All right. This very expensive global warming has got to stop. Our planet is freezing, record low temperatures, and our global warming scientists are stuck in ice. So, of course, all those comments are written in the winter, but but this is the place that. So there's Donald, and then there's Bernie Sanders and Hillary, who both are pretty much saying we got to do something. So you can. I am not a scientist, but I'm a grandmother. That's Hillary, with two eyes and a brain. So, there you go. I'm trying to give equal time there to some extent. Anyway, then there's people in the middle. Jerry Brown wrote to Carson because he'd gone to California and he'd made this quote. I know there are a lot of people who say, quote, overwhelming science, but when you ask them to show overwhelming evidence, they never show it. There is no overwhelming science that the things that are going on are man-caused and not naturally caused. Give me a break. So that was the Ben Carson quote. And then Jerry Brown said, and in fact, here's his little letter. There's the quote. There's the transcript of it. Said, I heard you said this while you're in California. Well, let me send you the evidence. And so Jerry Brown or his staffers put together a little thumb drive and sent please flash drive United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You can comment on that at some point. Synthesis report, the concluding installment of the fifth assessment report. The report represents 30,000 scientific papers, was written by more than 800 scientists representing 80 countries around the world who definitely concluded that, quote, human influence on the climate system is clear and growing with impacts observed across all continents and oceans, end quote. As scientists, your work may be used for one means or another. I think I'll go past, I'm not gonna go into that part. I guess the point, the point I want to make, I'm not going to read this slide either, is that if you're going to have a scientific question, you have to pose it so you can test it. It's testable. You can take, or you can have some falsifiability to it. Some of you mentioned, what about just observations? Or things that you just discover, that they're not necessarily hypothesis driven. That's true too. But I would submit that if you really want to test climate change, you can test the contrarian hypothesis. You can take the opposite and also run it through. But again, I don't want to go through that. Chew on. Okay. The researcher in society. How are we doing on time here? 5:02. Clearly not everything you work on is going to go into the area of affecting society. But oftentimes your responsibilities do go beyond those to science. And you need to decide how you would respond or not respond. What is your role and in public discussion? And you also got to remember which hat you're wearing. So are you just a citizen showing up at a meeting and talking about your opinion as a citizen, or do you have the hat on of being the scientist and the expert witness? That's something, and I would imagine that some folks in here will have to worry about that, especially since you already wear a hat.
That's right.
Yeah. So you need to remember to perform and present data as objectively and honestly as possible. And when you do advocate, then there's a biased perception that goes to advocating one side or another. What's this one? I think I'm gonna just and you probably guys are aware of this, that Nano folks, is that there is a publication about the social responsibility of nanoscience and nanotechnology, and there's a link here to that. It's from 2012 and it's been updated and published online. And that may be something that one of y'all might want to talk about with the last session when you talk about issues that may be in your own area. Okay. How about that? So, really, this is just by way of introduction. I just want to be a little tantalizing, and I'm not getting into much depth on any particular thing, but I think really the best is this our little cartoon with where'd he go? About what happens to our science, and how it's seen by society. So think about that when you're doing your work. I've even run into it when I was studying chipmunks up in Humboldt County. I got pulled over a couple of times. Thought I was doing funny things, but or they wanted me to apply the devices I was using to record chipmunks on for other uses. The law enforcement people did.